Right, our next speaker, a leading GP in the UK, if not the world. Our next speaker has directly helped over 150 patients, 151?
Yes.
I believe I saw in a tweet yesterday.
You did.
From his practice in Southport, achieve drug-free remission from type 2 diabetes, as well as saving thousands of pounds for the NHS. He's also an advisor to the Royal College of GPs and chair of our scientific advisory committee. Please welcome to the stage Dr. David Unwin.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So here we are again. I was a bit worried when Sam contacted me and he wouldn't let me talk about low-carb and diabetes again. So we have to talk about something else. GLP-1 drugs. Has anybody here not heard of the fat jabs or do I have to explain? Oh, that's really great. So you've all heard of them. That's wonderful. So it was really interesting because I didn't know that much about them. And what a fascinating subject. And I'm going to share what I discovered with you all over the next 45 minutes. I hope you're wondering about the lizard. I hope you are. That's my pet blue-tongue skink, Saphira. She was my 60th birthday gift from my children, and she lives in our kitchen. And Jen's down there now, and Jen keeps wondering, she says, how long do blue-tongue skinks live? Exactly. And the answer, Jen, is 15 to 16 years, and she's 5 or 6 now, so many years to enjoy in our kitchen. Marvellous. And she's kind of relevant to the talk, as you'll discover. Oh yes, I ought to say, I think I've said it already, I'm really not an expert in GLP-1. But I am curious, I am interested, and I don't know the answers, but we're going to explore it. I have a conflict of interest. I'm a scientific advisor to Abbott Laboratories. I don't think that's really a worry for today's presentation. So let's press on. Oh, there's a detail. Saphira, isn't she lovely? Look at her face. Oh, she has a blue tongue. Please notice the blue tongue. There we go. There we are. So, GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. It's really important to remember this is a naturally producing hormone. We're all producing it. In fact, it's produced by the intestine in response to eating. So the drugs we're talking about are they're like the hormone. They're a mimic of this natural hormone, and that's a most important point. So the GLP-1 hormone works in different ways. So it helps your body to make more insulin. It reduces the amount of sugar that your liver makes, the gluconeogenesis. Very importantly, the hormone slows down the digestion of food, so it takes longer for your body to absorb sugar in meals. And the key thing that everybody focuses on is the reduction in appetite. I put on the side there, again, they've got lots of names, they're all there. These are the medications. So as I've explained, the GLP-1 receptor agonist drugs mimic the hormone that you and I, that all of us produce anyway. Now, I've been using GLP-1 drugs for type 2 diabetes for years. So what's new? Well, what's new is the idea that we inject people with them, and we're using much, much bigger doses. So my experience as a doctor looking after people with type 2 diabetes with GLP-1 drugs isn't that relevant because we're starting to use much, much bigger doses. Why am I a little bit concerned? Why am I interested? Why is it even something to debate? One of the main points is, you can all go on the internet right now and you can access these drugs for yourselves. So you can bypass your GP. And in fact, I went online to do exactly that. So I went online and told them I was 121 kilos, which I'm not. And the good news is that I could reach 96 kilos in only 10 months. So you see, you can bypass doctors. And in fact, it asked me, did I want my doctor to know I was buying a GLP-1? And I said no. So you see, the result is, in my own practice, very large numbers of people are buying GLP-1 drugs. I don't even know they're on them, because they often don't consent to me knowing. So that's the first real worry, that you could be injecting yourself with a very potent drug that has important interactions, and I would have no idea you're even on it. Obviously, when I see people who've lost a lot of weight, you kind of wonder, and just raise an eyebrow, you just wonder, you hope they're on the low-carb diet, but some of them are not. They're injecting themselves. Costs about, I've found, some of the patients do tell me, obviously, and it costs them about £170 a month, which is surprising. I mean, that's a big sum of money that people are prepared to spend. It's odd, isn't it, really, the choices that people make, because you can say, well, I'm doing this course, this low carb course, and it's 50 quid or it's whatever, and they go, ooh, that's loads of money, that is. And yet I discover the same people are attracted by this quick fix, this idea that we could just jab it in, get the result. So the first worry is that it's slightly aside of primary care. I don't even know it's happening. That's odd, very odd. So what about the hype? I'm loving the hype side of this. So Wes Streeting, who I have met, he said, he'd heard low carb, good idea, it was very nice to me. Let's see what he actually delivers. But here he is actually having to deny that they're going to jab all the unemployed with GLP-1s. And, GLP-1s, maybe they'll cure unemployment. What do you think? Why not? It seems to do everything else, doesn't it? Delaying the BBC is going to delay aging. Well, I'll sign up for that. At my age, that would be good. Alzheimer's disease. Marvellous, marvellous. And only last week, the risk of cancer. So my goodness, it's going to do everything. No wonder they're paying I'd pay £170 a week to avoid dementia, aging, and cancer. It's wonderful stuff, wonderful. So here's an example. This is Ray, also featured on the BBC, doing well on Wegovy injections. He's lost 14 kilos, which is over 2 stone, which is marvellous for Ray, and he's clearly happy about it. Good, he's lost the weight, he's had some benefit. Professor Naveed Sattar made a relevant point, really, that the NHS cannot afford Wegovy for everybody. And so this idea that it would bankrupt the NHS. So actually, as an NHS GP, at the moment, I'm not able to prescribe GLP-1 jabs for my patients because locally they don't have the money to fund that, which is why so many patients are having to go secretly and buy it. Here we are. Barbara McGowan says that most clinicians hope that the 2-year limit there is at the moment on prescribing these injections will be lifted. Well, there's a few physicians in here. I don't know that most clinicians are hoping that the 2-year limit will be lifted. But this is really important. Nobody can have it in the UK for longer than 2 years anyway. So that's something we have to work around. So again, the BBC giving lots and lots of coverage to these injections. Yes, it's very worrying, and lots of people are overweight. And they're worried because only a tiny proportion of the people with obesity are getting access to these vital drugs. Apparently, the Wegovy and another drug, Ozempic, which I actually is very popular in my practice, can help people lose weight, yes, often 15 to 20% of their body weight. It's an enormous amount of weight they can lose. And quite right, the BBC, or Fergus Walsh, is telling us that that amount of weight loss is life-changing. So, it sounds really good. Of course, there's a but. And the buts are what this talk is about, the buts. So here's a but. Will it last? All sorts of things have come and gone. Will it last? Most importantly is the idea that we weigh up the pros and cons. And that applies to anything we do in life or in medicine, weighing up the pros and cons. And that's why the hype aspect of it worries me a bit, because it doesn't feel like we're weighing this up properly. So, will it last? And what happens if the drug is stopped? What happens? Because it's going to be stopped, because at the moment you've only got 2 years, and then you're going to have to come off it legally. But before we go on to the buts, let's just look a little bit more about how effective it is. So there have been various trials. There's step 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this is one of the step trials. The average weight loss over 48 weeks was 14.8%. That is life-changing. That is amazing. And we just have to remember that 14.8%. So what can I achieve at Norwood Avenue with my humble yet sarcastic approach? What can I achieve? Well, so the average weight loss for somebody at Norwood Avenue that goes on a low-carb diet is not as great as the 14.8%. We get 9.8% over 40 months. So I was quite proud of that until I saw the Wegovy thing. So that's a bit disappointing. I'm not doing as well as Wegovy. But then again, I'm not using the drugs and we don't have any side effects. So the weighing up thing is important. But there's hope from America. Hooray! Hooray for America. Hurrah, hurrah. So, this is a paper that everybody loves, trochalagen. So I wrote this paper with trochalagen. And he was looking at what he could do with low carb. And he's comparing it to one of these step trials for Wegovy. So you can see there on the left, those are the patients, how many of them lost more than 5%? And then as we go over to the right, how many patients lost more than 15%? So you'll see that in Tro's clinic, he's really, compared to the step 1 and the step 2 studies, his patients are losing really a comparable amount of weight to using Wegovy. Isn't that interesting? That's really interesting. So his average loss, look at that, 15.5%. Again, hooray for America. Well done. Everything's better there. Everything. So here we are. So the step 1 trial averaged 14.8%. Tro's clinic does 15.5%. And I come in like 3rd place. Hooray for the UK. 3rd place. Humble. 9.8%. 9.8%. But why is this? And I have to admit, I was a little bit annoyed that Tro had beaten me. Just a tiny bit disappointed to be beaten. So why? Why is Wegovy beating me? And why is Tro beating me? I think I know. It's to do with the baseline weight, you see. Because the Americans just beat us in that as well. They win. And look, thank you. They start off at a heroic 124 kilos. So of course you see, if you have more weight to lose, it can't be a surprise that there's a bigger weight loss. And so maybe, perhaps, at Norwood Avenue we didn't do too badly, because I start off at about 100 kilos. We're just not as big. Okay, so or maybe we're all equal. I don't know. We're certainly friends. But coming back to this question of what happens if the drug is stopped. And it's really handy that the STEP people, very, very thorough, here in their own paper is what happens when it stops. And if you look carefully at the graph, you can see that after 20 months there's a divergence in the graph, and that's because half of the participants were switched to placebo. And what you can see there very clearly is that the weight comes back. The weight comes back when the drug is stopped. So that has to be a concern, because clearly we're stopping the drugs at 2 years in the UK, but apparently most physicians want these drugs to be continued indefinitely. And maybe that's what we have to do. Do we have to use these drugs indefinitely, and how will that turn out, and do we know? What happens when the drug is stopped? And this needs sharing with clients and patients. There needs to be informed consent to what is going on. They need to understand properly the pros and cons of what they're about to do. And that's what worries me by the doctor offering me the drug on the internet, who isn't going to talk to me. They did ask for a photo of me to check it was me, kind of thing. But there aren't any proper onboarding in terms of consent, informed consent, and that's a worry. Oh, I love this. I don't know whether any of you know Professor David Haslam. He wrote a paper with me in 2014, and this was one of the things. It's the history of miracle cures for obesity. The history is so interesting. So there we are. 1933. Oh dear. Toxic hypothermia. It was discontinued. 1940s and 1950s. How about amphetamines? That sounds a good idea. Amphetamines, they're fun, aren't they? Let's prescribe that for everybody for years and years. Oh, it's addictive, so we'll have to stop that. So we stopped that. And thus it goes on. Yes, addictive. Oh yeah, 1973. Who would have guessed valvular heart disease? They didn't guess that, and then it was stopped. Sibutramine, cardiovascular problems. Orlistat, Eric was mentioning that. I mean, you couldn't make that drug up, really, could you? You eat the pizza, it's down the loo, it's slimy, oh God, it's so messy if you cheat. And that was such I used to prescribe it for a while, but it's kind of a hostile act, isn't it, really? Because I used to have a little smirk thinking, if you cheat, you'll be really sorry. But I'm not that kind of doctor anymore. And all this stat, nobody's having it now. I'm particularly interested in the last one, Rimonabant, and we're going to go into that in a minute. But doesn't this make the point that the history of drugs for curing obesity is littered with important lessons? And what worries me is that we don't seem good at learning. I just can't believe that we're all blindly jabbing ourselves, paying £170 without asking, is it okay? What are the consequences? It's very odd. And yet again and again and again, this is exactly what we do with a new miracle. So I love this. This is 2006, so I'm a GP then, working away, and this Rimonabant sounds good. Look, it's wonderful. They lose weight, and it's good for triglycerides, and oh look, HDL cholesterol as well. Marvelous stuff. Apparently, it's generally well tolerated. Don't worry, the only side effect is a little bit of nausea. And it's achieving appetite suppression, weight loss, significant improvements in cardiovascular risk. And very interestingly, it was found to help substance use disorders like nicotine. Marvellous, isn't it? It's absolutely the very thing that everybody should have. 1 year later. Just 1 year later, 2007. A surprise. Patients given Rimonabant were 2.5 times more likely to discontinue the treatment because of depressive mood disorders. Anxiety goes up 3 times. And this it was so serious, the drug was suspended. That was the end of it. So we went in 1 year from, we all need to get this stuff. It's amazing. 1 year later, depression, anxiety, adverse psychiatric events. So we've kind of maybe been here before. This is really important that we just pause a little bit to think about, is it safe? What's it like on the long term? Particularly when we're considering young people. The suggestion that we would start young people on this. Anyway, let's carry on our exploration. So if you remember the BBC gushing, enthusiastic about this wonderful weight loss. So what is the balance of pros and cons, and how do we know? But before we go there, I want you to understand a little bit more about where the GLP drugs came from, and this is where my pet comes in. Because look, here's another lizard with a blue tongue. Only this is the Gila monster. Sapphira isn't a Gila monster. This is Sapphira's cousin, American cousin, bigger again, better. But the Gila monster is not a good pet if you were thinking of having one. Not a good pet because they have a really painful bite. And what's interesting about that painful bite is the pain lasts a very long time. And when they looked into why the bite was painful for a very long time, guess what? There is a GLP-1 substance in that venom. And what's different about it, and this is what's different about the injections to the naturally produced hormone, is that it's long-acting. So what was in these lizards was long-acting, and that's why the injections can be given once a week, because it's really long-acting. Obviously, they'd got a bit of work to sort of take out the venom poisony bit and find out which was the good bit, but it took them some years, and that is the origin of the GLP-1 drugs that we use now. So, again, it wasn't very long before the papers started reporting pancreatitis. I think this is the Times was mentioning pancreatitis. And then, tragically, on the BBC, there was a nurse, and this lady died after only 2 injections. And then it got worse. Initially, it was in the sun. We always go to the sun, don't we, if we want to get something really accurate, if I want to learn medicine. Learn from the sun. They know what they're doing. But I saw that and I thought, well, where on earth has that come from? But actually, it had come from the British Medical Journal. And there was a freedom of information request about, okay, how many deaths have we had from GLP-1 drugs in the last year, I think it was. And the BMJ, surprise, surprise, are saying we need full consideration of benefits and risk because 82 people have died. Now, we've been, which fad are we on? The low-carb diet, the Atkins alter. But how many people do we know that have died from the diet that we believe in? Well, I'm proud to say I haven't lost any patients. Anybody else lost patients on the low-carb? No? Have you lost any?
Yeah, they still die.
Oh, that's disappointing. Mine. Oh, yeah, no, mine don't. Mine never die. They never die. Never. But it makes the point, doesn't it, that we're all rushing to buy these jabs. And it was the front page on the Sun there, 82 deaths. We're not careful enough. We're not careful. Maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. I don't know. I'm not an expert. But let's be careful, and let's be very careful with young people. Very careful. Let's go back to the pros and the cons. If we are using these drugs, so we need to, how do we find out what are the pros and cons? I think this is a really good paper on this. They looked at 215,000 people, and there you can see on the left the hazard ratios for the benefit, and on the right the same for adverse effects. You can see there at the top, if we think about adverse effects first, nausea is really common. Probably in my patients, depends the dose, is very much dose dependent, but about a third of the patients get nausea. I find really common is constipation because you see, if you remember from the very early slides, this drug is slowing your gut down. And I've had one patient in intensive care with these drugs, and that person's gut slowed down so much, the whole gut just stopped working, and she was over a month in intensive care. So most of the adverse effects are minor. Most of them are minor and dose dependent, and you can reduce the dose. But for a few people, something like pancreatitis, or that patient I had, it can be very, very serious. Here's the intriguing bit. What about the benefits? And if you look at the arrows there, it looks as if it was helping people opioid use, alcohol use, suicide, apparently better, sedative use disorders. So it may be that these drugs might help with addiction. And in fact, I found a paper on this suggesting that the mechanism might be related to the reward processing, stress and cognitive function, so that there was, perhaps it may be right, And I have to be honest and tell you, so I have some patients, I can think of one person, and for this person, the idea of giving up bread caused him to panic. So it was always, I'll go low carb next Monday. But it was really important because his diabetes was really bad, and he was probably 150 kilos, a very, very big person. But what concerned me was the very idea of giving up bread caused him to gain kilos and kilos. So I was making the situation worse I made him more anxious by weighing him, because then he had to address his failure. He was saying, I will give up the bread. Like when? He just couldn't do it. And actually, I was harming him by this insistence on doing this thing that he could not do. And of course, he was an addict. He was an addict. And I have to share with you that I did use a GLP-1, and it worked for him well, because he didn't have the cravings. And this is why I'm so confused, because in that particular case, I was desperate to help him. I had nothing else to offer, and it did help him. Jen would say, if she was on stage, that of course it isn't enough just to give a drug and walk away. That person got support, and I helped them. We talked about food addiction as well as the drug, but the two together for him were really good. So this, maybe it's encouraging. It's encouraging. What's interesting is to look at if you look at your patients and you ask them, how's it going? What I find, I don't know about the other clinicians in the room, I find after a while they start having GLP-1 holidays. So they actually stop the jabs when they go on holiday because they want to enjoy food. And they start having holidays. Their Christmas, they think, I won't bother. Also, they say things like, I'm fed up because I never enjoy food anymore. And very many of them drift off GLP-1s. And this is a study looking at the percentage discontinuing GLP-1 at a year and at 2 years. You can see at 2 years on this particular study, 72% of the people had given up the GLP-1. Of course, the question is why. It was interesting that poorer people gave it up sooner, but is that because the drugs are expensive? So we don't know whether that was a side effect thing or whether they simply couldn't afford it. But nevertheless, I find a significant number of my patients start these drugs, but they don't continue it when you ask. A little worry that one of the problems with RCTs is you have to exclude other conditions so that you're only looking at one variable. And one of the variables that was excluded from the trials on the GLP-1 drugs was depression itself. And so the authors of this study were concerned that there was no data available to assess the clinical implication of GLP-1 use on people with depression. So they did it is admittedly an epidemiological study, but it was all they could do. So they looked at 162,000 people, and you can see there, this can only be an association, it's not causation, but a little bit worrying to see that there was a 195% higher risk of depression, 108 for anxiety, and 106 for suicidal behaviour. Now, of course, suicide is very rare, so it's a relative increase in a rare thing. But nevertheless, it's still something that worries me a little. And in fact, that it varies depending upon the drug. So it may be that this helps us decide which of these GLP-1s to use. Now come to another point. Why are my patients overweight? They're having too much of a poor diet. So they're overfed and undernourished. So if you use Wegovy and just eat less of the same diet, all you've done is had even fewer nutrients. So this makes the point that we can't just give Wegovy over the internet and walk away. These people need support. So that if I'm using these drugs, they're going for nutrient-dense foods, and I'm watching them. Because if you become nutrient deficient, are you protein deficient? What are we deficient in? This is a slide looking at nutrient density. And basically, if it's for women between the ages of 15 and 49. Oh. Now you can. Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Yeah. Women between the ages of 15 and 49, they have a choice for nutrient density. They could have 2 teaspoons of liver Or they could have 4 kilos of refined grains 3 times a day. So you see, nutrient density and everything in between really matters, and they're saying we need to think about nutrient-dense foods, which they're suggesting animal source foods with dark green leafy vegetables, the very low-carb diet that I suggest. So as I say, supporting people, giving them advice on diet if they're on GLP-1s may be really important. A quick point really about when we use, so GLP-1, it's a naturally produced thing. So maybe these drugs are okay because they're naturally produced. But endorphins are naturally produced, and we don't suggest morphine long-term's a great idea. Serotonin is naturally produced, very much like GLP-1 in little bursts, but it's not always the best thing for people to go on serotonin, the SSRI drugs, long-term. So it's not the same produced as a hormone in little bursts as it is an injection once a week. Patient, I love this guy. So there he is. He weighs 158 kilos. In March, by December, wow, there he is. Now this is a low-carb patient. The point is he's not hungry. Isn't that interesting? That's the thing that the patients and you all know. He's not hungry. And wouldn't it be interesting? What about, why isn't he hungry? Why isn't he hungry? So there are small studies that show that naturally produced GLP-1 increases with a low-carb diet. Is that part of why so many of us don't feel hungry? What about naturally boosting your own hormone instead of buying it? And there's also another small study, this is a Japanese study, that exercise also boosts GLP-1. So maybe exercise and low carb might be a better place to begin. Coming on to a study, this is Kirsten. And Kirsten is the lightest she's been for 32 years, and that's her weight. I've got data going back on Kirsten all that time. And you can see where she went low carb, and she's put on a top there to show you the clothing she used to wear and the difference it's made to her. The thing is, for Kirsten, she's come off metformin, docosate, atorvastatin, amitriptyline, Gaviscon. Oh, and she came off cigarettes as well. But she came off a GLP-1 injection and then lost the weight. She'd been on that GLP-1 for 5 years. And this is some work. Christine's in the audience. I'm so grateful to Christine. She has done the statistics for many people in this room. She is a low-carb hero. Christine, thank you. Thank you. So Christine does my stats. She is a rare thing, a medical statistician. And if we look at Kirsten's journey, there was normal care there. There was 5 years on Trulicity injections. She didn't lose weight. She was using the Trulicity for 5 years. Think of all the money. And then finally she got it. And Christine's done the p-values, so you can get p-values with an n equals 1. And there was no significant difference between her weight before, all those years before GLP-1 and all the years after. But look at the p-value when she goes low carb. Very small. So that n equals 1, thank you, Christine, was really important, and n equals 1 can matter. So who am I using GLP-1 drugs on? I told you of one case. Here's another one. This is Andrew. Andrew, type 2 diabetic, on loads of insulin. I gave him a CGM first. He started learning what gave him sugar. Then we phased out the insulin. So he was on GLP-1 instead of insulin. And for him, that has been great. So he's on a GLP-1, but he needs the GLP-1. If he stops that, he goes hungry again and the diet deteriorates. So for this person, This choice was a good one. Insulin or GLP-1, weighing it up. And he's now got the best diabetic control off insulin that he's had for 12 years. So for him, this is life-changing, really life-changing. But look at the drugs he came off. He had heart failure, so he was on furosemide. His heart failure's improved. Gabapentin, blah, blah, He went from 14 drugs to 6. So for that person, that drug was useful and good, but it was done with me watching him, and I did the diet, and it's been a lot of work, but it's really worth it. So this is my last slide. I was on the train with a friend, Rod Taylor, who's here somewhere, and he said to me, "What difference did the French Revolution make to Europe?" And I thought that's a really I thought that was the beginning of let's chat history on the train. We got a 3-hour journey, and Rod said to me, "The answer is it's too early to say." The French Revolution, 250 years, it's far too early to say. And that's the same as GLP-1 hormones. It's a bit early to say. We don't know, but we do need to be careful. And so my feeling is, well, if GLP-1 is boosted by low carb, we should be trying low carb first. And how many deaths have we had? Well, it's not 82, so good place to begin. It's what I've said, really. We must look carefully at the overall risks and the benefits. At the very most, all we've got in the UK is a 2-year opportunity for these patients. But if it's 2 years, then it's really just an opportunity to learn. That's the most it can be, is an opportunity to perhaps not have the cravings, perhaps you might be able to help food addiction, but you can't do it alone. They need support, they need something else. So I think another thing I'd say, maybe people are worrying because they're on GLP-1 drugs for type 2 diabetes. It's not quite the same. I haven't had problems with my patients with diabetes using, say, the tablets. Semaglutide tablet I use a lot. The safety profile seems to me to be rather better. It's a much lower dose. It's not the same as the jabs once a week, and I think that needs making very clear. Here's a thought. Bariatric surgery, that's a thing, isn't it? It's quite a worrying thing. Now, it may be that GLP-1 is better than bariatric surgery. I wonder what it's doing, how the bariatric surgeons feel about this, because they're presumably all going out of business. I don't know. We were talking last night, they're probably retraining. Maybe some of them could become low-carb doctors. I don't know. They have nothing to do. I think we're just about done. Oh yes, let's not forget ultra-processed food addiction, a possible area of GLP-1 use. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Another excellent talk. Thank you so much, David, and thank you for all your support over the years. Massively thankful for that, and for being our chair of our scientific advisory committee. So thank you.
Well, actually, I was just going to say I enjoyed researching that talk. So when you first gave it me, I thought, oh bloody hell! What? 45 minutes? Oh God, I don't know anything. But it's actually really interesting. And the miracle of the internet means it's there for us all. So I found it interesting, even if nobody else did. Time well spent for me.
Excellent. I can't wait to come up to Southport and meet the blue-tongued, the skink. Yeah, Sophia. Well, thank you very much, Dr. David Unwin. Thank you, David.